Lava Life. I saw you asked the question, how many people have heard of the brand Lava Life? I should ask, because I always assume. So I'm not surprised. When we were at our height, we had 98% brand recognition in Canada, which I think was second to Tim Hortons at one time, which is, quite mind-boggling for four guys in Toronto without a lot of formal business education to get that done. How many of you have used the service? So that's better than usual, but I still say you're a bunch of liars in the room, because I know statistically that's not true, right? But this was one of our big issues, was getting people to admit that they were using technology to address their dating needs. When we first started, it was, believe me, and it was the late 80s, and it wasn't internet, it was telephone, and the brand was Telepersonals. Trust me, you didn't come into the water cooler on Monday morning talking about the great date you'd had on Telepersonals. This was an underground kind of, but it was very effective, right? But no one liked to admit it. So one of the first things we had to do in creating that brand was we had to transition from this heavily stigmatized, geez, if I use technology to meet somebody, I must not have any other way, to if I wasn't using this very efficient technology, I'm kind of missing out. And thankfully, you had four single guys running the company that were getting a date a night, that were living testimony to how efficient this thing was, right? It was just unbelievable. And it was one of those things you could sell with passion. But, I look back on Lava, and, people, it's tempting to think, okay, yeah, we were in the right place at the right time. The technology was great. We worked hard, yada, yada. That was all true. We got lucky. But when I look back on why Lava Life was successful, and this is a lesson that can be applied to any size of business, which is why, I think, and any type of business, which is why I think it's appropriate for the conversation today. For me, it wasn't the technology, it wasn't the hard work, it wasn't the luck, it wasn't the timing, it was organizational development. Now, that is not the first title you'd think of when you think of a company that was probably responsible for more one-night stands than Tim sold donuts, right? OD. Probably wasn't the first thing that popped to mind, but here's what I mean. Let's break it down. Vision and values. And this can be applied to everybody. Vision, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on because it's kind of one of those obvious ones. But what I mean by that is having the discipline, no matter how intense the do-sell cycle or how small or big the business, to sit down once a year minimum and say, this is where I want my business to be at this time next year. Let's keep it really simple, right? Here's what I'm building towards. Here's what I'm building towards in 3 years. Here's where I want to be. Here's what I want my day to look like. Here's how many people I want to have working with, for me, whatever language you use. Here's the number of clients I want to have. Here's the kind of work I want to be doing. But this year, I want to have 4 new clients. And I want the average billing of those clients to be $9,000. That leads to, okay, how am I going to get that done? Well, I know from my past that I have to make 20 calls to get 1 client, so I've got to make 100 calls, right? How am I going to do that? It leads to a plan. If you don't know where you're going, you got no chance of getting there. And there's so many studies that have been done. Marisha knows this, right? About people that the difference between companies that get up every morning and say, do your best, and let's see where we are at the end of the year, to the ones that sit down and say, here's where I want to be specifically at the end of the year. Here's some goals that I have to get me there, and here's how I'm going to reward myself or my people if those get achieved. And the difference in performance between those two companies will blow your mind. I can't overstate how important it is to know where you want to go. Even bigger for me, as I look back at Lava, was the values piece. And this comes into play every day for me, even today. What I mean by values, let me give you a couple of examples. Two of our values at Lavalife were teamwork and open-mindedness. Now, teamwork, you can walk into any mid-sized company in North America that's, let's say, north of $20 million or $40 million in sales. You're going to see the chart on the wall. It's going to have their mission statement, and it's going to have, here's what we stand for. Here's our core values, right? And I'll bet you that 95% of those have teamwork right on the top. Who doesn't like teamwork, right? Everyone likes to work in a team. It seems such like an obvious thing to want to be a part of. Here's what we did at Lavalife to make the teamwork value meaningful and make people know that we really meant it. When we used to hire somebody, the job spec went out, the applications came in, you'd get down to the, say, 8 final ones based on qualifications. We'd invite them all in for an interview, put all 8 people in the room. We'd walk in and we'd hand them a piece of paper that on the top of it, it said NASA Man on the Moon exercise. And that was an exercise that asked you to simulate crash landing on the moon. And here is the list of survival items that are important for you to survive in this harsh new climate. Rank order these in order of priority. Power bars, solar flares, blankets to stay warm, oxygen, water. I can't even remember what was on there. There's a right answer, though. NASA exercise. Everyone did it, handed in their sheet of paper. We tabled up the scores. Okay, thank you. Now I want you to get into groups of 2 or 3, whatever the number is we had. Say 3 groups of 3 if there's 9 people. Do the exercise again. Work on it together. Come up with the right answer. In 15 years of running that exercise, I never once saw an individual score beat a team score, ever. So the message there to people that wanted to come work with us was that we wanted you to work together. We're going to prove to you that more people in on a decision make for a better decision. And we want to see how you do it. Like, we were in there watching, right? So you get somebody, and this is the most important message about the teamwork one for me, and one you can apply to the people that you choose as partners or clients or collaborators, suppliers. We got to watch how these people acted. You know, and you watch somebody dig their heels in because they knew we were watching and they were convinced that the power bar was the most important thing when you were freezing to death. And you'd watch that argument discussion go on, and you'd watch how the ego got in the way, right? I know, you know, I'm faced with all these logical arguments from my team members, but I'm going to hold my ground because I don't want to admit that I may have been wrong on this power bar thing. I don't want to work with people like that anymore. You know, I look back on my career and the amount of energy I've spent trying to convince people for reasons other than logic or common sense why this is the right way to go. And you realize in hindsight that it's about their egos or insecurities or stuff that they're bringing from their personal life into work. Jeez, you know, come on, it's about the business. And I think about the business of design and the few times that, you know, I'm in the spa business, so I've had to design, like, be involved in the process of designing spas. And even so much more important when you've got something like this, where it's not a quantitative answer. The NASA Man on the Moon exercise, there's a right and a wrong answer. There's a linear logic to it. We're talking about taste here. You know, and you've all experienced this. How do you have a collaborative discussion about how something looks and feels? Well, I relied on the brand character statement, right? And everybody getting around, this is what we're trying to achieve in words. So at least you had something to debate the final product or the design board against. You know, I mean, we've agreed that this is the look and feel. Is this kind of the look and feel? And you still are down to some very qualitative, subjective discussions. So even more important, as you guys decide who you want to partner with or bring in to help you or supply to you, you want people that are going to look at the challenge with an open mind, not get hung up on their own style or point of view to the detriment of the process or what you're trying to achieve. And I would urge everybody to apply that filter. Put down in words what the value of if teamwork was one of them, what it means to you, and actively use that as you choose who you want to work with. Just think about all the energy that's been wasted, you know, trying to get the right answer that had nothing to do with the business process, but had something to do with a bunch of other bullshit that we can't afford. It's hard enough as it is. You just heard me, 724, grinding, do sell, you know, cycle. Like, who wants to deal with that crap? Ridiculous, right? I won't work with anybody anymore that doesn't have the wherewithal to look in the mirror and say, you know what, here's what I'm not so good at. Here's what I'm willing to look at about myself that I'm not perfect at. Let's talk about it. Good idea. Never thought of that. You don't hear those words coming out of somebody's mouth, chances are you don't want to work with them. You know, if you can't say I never thought of that because it makes you look like you never thought of that, and that's a bad thing, don't need it, right? Don't need it. Too old, not enough time left, too much energy, been there, done that, it's cost me millions, no interest in working that way anymore. I'd suggest you might think about the same. Open-mindedness really quickly. Another important one for us. If you can imagine coming to work at Lavalife, right? You walk into a boardroom and there's conversations going on everything from conventional marriage to the latest gay sex fetish and everything in between. Like, our job was to give people what they wanted online. So you imagine some of the discussions we'd get into. If you came into our place with, you know, you were homophobic or you had preconceived notions about premarital sex based on your religion, nothing wrong with that. Just wasn't the place for you because you wouldn't be able to make a meaningful contribution to our business. So it was important for us to articulate open-mindedness and figure out whether or not you were open-minded or not through our questions and interview process to be able to make a contribution to our business. So in that way, we formed a culture at one time of 600 people that I'd like to think were open-minded, collaborative, team-oriented. But I don't care if it's 600 people or you and your partner. Same lessons, same methodology. It's a discipline. Write it down. Who do we want to be? What do we want to stand for? If I was if my company was a walking, living person walking down the street, what would they be, right? I don't know, just off the top of my head, design business, I would say collaborative has got to be some words in there somewhere. Creative. How do you get at creativity and the type of people you want to attract? All the stuff about introspection. There's words in there to address that stuff, and then there's active processes you can use to screen your suppliers or partners or employees on the way in. Critical. So I can talk to you about, you know, building pro formas and P&Ls and heaven forbid if you use technology in your business, collaboration, balance sheets, how you grow small businesses to medium businesses, what do you do if you fail. I'm happy to do all of that, but I wanted to pass on the stuff I feel most strongly about, right now anyway, which is life of an entrepreneur. Keep going, right? Tough choice. Congratulations for making it. Congratulations for hanging in there. Thanks for taking 2 days out of the do sell cycle to hear what we have to say. Hopefully we earn it. And then vision and values. No matter what size you are, can't beat it. Vision and values. So